Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. It's a playoff week, although it doesn't really feel like a playoff week. We'll see if Tommy Lawlor concurs. He's laughing already. That's a good sign. From EaglesBlitz.com, longtime Eagles writer Tommy Lawlor joins us here on Birds 365. And I say long time because you're sitting down and talking with two other longtime guys who've been following this league for a long time. Tommy, I don't forget about the Eagles. It's never happened to the Eagles before, but just in the history of the league, I can't remember as historic a collapse as this team has gone through in the last month and a half. Why? Give us your best psychological analysis. We're all trying and we're all coming up short, so I'm going to give you a shot here too, Professor Lawlor. What the hell's happened to the Eagles?
Well, it feels like they did everything they could to get to 10-1. I mean, the team had to really battle there. If you think about the game against the Bills, the game against the Chiefs, and even in those games, they got some lucky breaks. Let's just be honest. If Valdez-Scantling catches that pass, Kansas City probably wins that game.
That's true.
Buffalo had any number of things that could have gone their way. I mean, it took, a 59-yard field goal on a rainy, windy day to go in to get the thing to overtime. And then if you think about a couple other games, remember the one game against Washington, Reed Blankenship's forearm kept a pass from being completed. Yeah. That if it wasn't for that forearm, Washington's in field goal range, and the Eagles could have lost that game. So the Eagles could have lost a handful of times, but they fought, they got a little lucky, they took advantage of the breaks, they get to 10-1, then they run into two buzzsaws, San Francisco and Dallas. And listen, there's no shame in losing to those teams. Those are two best teams, or two of the best teams in the NFC. And so that gets the Eagles to 10-3. And then I think at that point, the Eagles thought, okay, the schedule lightens up and we'll be able to handle it. And they assumed they would win down the stretch. And they did, and they blew the game against Seattle. They blew the game against Arizona. And then Sunday was just a meltdown. And so the team, I think, thought, once we get through that gauntlet of schedule, we can let up a little bit. That just the opposite. That should have been the time to put the hammer down and play your best football to build momentum going into the playoffs. Instead, the team relaxed a little bit, had some things go against them where they were getting lucky in that winning streak. They got unlucky in the losing streak. And now, again, we've seen this team lose 5 out of 6, and just it's a head scratch. This is one of the worst ways to finish out a season we've seen.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put that up there, because isn't that at the end when you said the luck kind of churns, and coaches hate that term luck, but let's be honest, it's real.
Absolutely.
And there's so many one-score games, and the Eagles were winning them early and then losing them late. Think about Seattle, Arizona specifically. Those are one-score games. You make one stop defensively, you win those games. You got 13 wins. Everybody's happier. Maybe not great. I think it changes. San Francisco still has the number 1 seed because they're probably playing harder and they to keep it. But you probably have the number 2 seed and everybody's happy and going into the playoffs and saying, well, the Eagles got a real shot, at least to get back to the NFC Championship game. Even go back to the Jets, 10-1.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, the worst play of the season for him. If they just punt the football, they probably win that game.
Think about the in the Seattle game. Seattle's backed up inside the 10-yard line. Locke throws a pass over the middle. It's right by Nick Morrow, right by him. He couldn't get his hands to it, so it wasn't like he didn't. It was like it wasn't like his mistake.
Yeah,
but that ball is just a little different. He's picking that pass off the 15-yard line. The Eagles are probably going to add points right there, and they probably win that game by double digits. And all of a sudden you say, hey, the defense showed us they could close out a game. All of a sudden they've maybe got some confidence in who knows how the next few games go. Instead, that ball falls harmlessly to the ground, and it turns into the James Bradbury pick on James Bradbury festival, and Seattle marches down and scores the winning touchdown. Man. And the Eagles their mojo's gone, when they had that 20-3 lead on the Giants, you thought, okay, they flipped the switch. And the next thing you know, it's 20-18. And I know as I'm watching it, I'm sitting there going, here we go. It's meltdown time. And they got lucky that they held on for that game. And in the Cardinal game, when they were up 21-6, I said, okay, they learned their lesson from last week, and then all of a sudden it's 21-13, and you said, "Oh boy, here we go." And sure enough, the team just completely folded in the second half of that game, and they didn't bother showing up on Sunday. So
all that being said, would you not say the Eagles, to quote the famous Bill Parcells line, "You are what your record says you are"? There were several games that they lost that they could have won, but
yeah.
there were also several games that they won that they could have lost. When you put it all in the wash, doesn't it come out to 11-6, exactly where they are?
So everybody, in regard to just about everything in the world, has recency bias, right? Uh, you whatever just happened to you is the way you think of something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you go back to 1991, the Eagles finished 7-1 behind Gang Green playing awesome defense, and everybody's fired up by that team. Hey, if they had just made the playoffs, they would have been so tough. They might have won the Super Bowl. Well, they didn't make the playoffs, so they finished the season hot, but they started the season cold. In the end, you had a 10-6 team that was just missed the playoffs. This year, you had a team that started red hot and finished cold, but they finished with an 11-6 record, not that different than 10-6 the 91 team was. So the overall season was a success, right? It's just the end was a disaster, and you blew the opportunity you had to be the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed, win the division. You blew those opportunities, so that adds on to the frustration as compared to if they had gone, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2, 3-3, and then so on and so forth. They've been more back and forth. You could have lived with it because it wouldn't have built your expectations. But because of recency bias, what we saw at the end was a team that just folded, and we all sit there and say, "Well, I don't trust this team at all." We're not treating them like an 11-6 team. We're treating them like a 6-11 team.
Yeah. And you're right about the recency bias, Tommy, but that's part of it because human nature is human nature. And forget about the outside world. It's got to be the inside world. Can the Eagles recover from that too? Because let's face it, they should beat Tampa Bay. Even in Tampa Bay, they have better players. They
Absolutely.
should win the game, even on the road. But I think we could all envision them losing the game after what they've just been through. Can they turn it around? Dallas Goedert essentially said, "You know what? We were just, coasting to the finish line." Can they turn the light switch on? I think they can offensively. I'm not sure they can do it defensively.
They absolutely can do it. There's no question. There's enough talent. This team can win Monday night. Oh, God forbid. And then they can, the next week you'd be probably playing at San Francisco, and that's a whole other, challenge. But again, it's possible. Absolutely. No question about it. Now, part of the problem is we keep talking about talent in the roster, and it feels like this is a sports car that the mechanic can't figure out why it's not running correctly. And it is not. It's most definitely not running correctly. And so we haven't seen them play like a playoff team in a while now. Even when they were, beating Kansas City in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Those were still flawed performances, right? They got down at halftime. I think, was it down 17-6 to Kansas City? And then in Buffalo had complete control of that game for a while. So it took big comebacks and like say lucky breaks to win those games. So the last time this team looked genuinely good for 60 minutes, I don't know. That's a hard question. Tampa Bay maybe in week 3, I think it was, when they won 25-11.
Yeah, I think that was their best game, ironically, of the year. Their most complete game.
Exactly.
Most complete game.
They gave up 174 yards on defense. They gained 472 yards on offense. And the game was only 25-11 because the Eagles were 1 for 5 in the red zone. If they score a couple of touchdowns, then all of a sudden that's a blowout. And we sit there, but at the time that was the talking point on the team is the Eagles are good, but they can't score in the red zone, and that's keeping the opponents in the game. They figured out the red zone stuff, and then everything else started to go wrong. And that's what this season has felt like. It's felt like a really bizarre game of whack-a-mole where the coach just solved one problem and something else pops up. The Eagles had the best run defense in the league for the first 2 months, and now all of a sudden James Conner looks like freaking Earl Campbell. It's just a strange season, and there's part of me that really is really excited to see what they do, And there's another part of me that's just ready for this to be over so we can go ahead and start focusing on something else, because this season, I can't imagine what the coaches think. You sit there and you watch the tape and you're like, how are these problems happening? Because there's some smart veterans on this team, and they just do some things that just blow your mind.
Yeah.
It's really hard to figure out.
Couple things. I went down the O.J. Simpson James Conner road last week.
I like Thomas because he was physical. I like Earl Campbell because he was more physical.
And he was dragging Eagles tacklers with him. And then a couple times he didn't even have to drag them. They just said, you go on your own.
Yeah.
There's Earl Campbell is on an island to himself.
Yes, sir.
Never been as physical a back as he has.
Yeah, I agree with that. But
here, I've been throwing this theory out, and I get mixed reviews. No one is going, damn, Joe, you're exactly right. So I don't know how right I am or aren't. If you believe the Eagles offensive coordinator and their play caller has a grasp of what's going on with the Birds right now, which some people don't. 2 weeks in a row, when asked about their play calling and why they did what they did when they did it, the first one being in the throes of right after the Eagles fan base chanting when the Eagles had the ball, run the ball, just run the ball, and the fallout thereafter of Eagle players complaining about it. 2 weeks in a row, he actually defended the Eagles offense by saying, when we go to the line of scrimmage, it hasn't been decided yet whether it's a run or a pass. That if it's an RPO, they can go either way. That if Jaylen wants to check out of the play and go either way, we've got options off all our plays. So if you want to try and balance run to pass, well, that's kind of something that's done on the fly in the middle of the game, which I read into it that Jaylen's running the offense, that they may send him plays, whisper in his ear about something, but then Jaylen decides in the moment exactly what the hell they should do with the football. I think that's a lot. I know he was the runner-up for MVP in the NFL last year, and it got him a $250 million contract, but he's still a relatively young quarterback in the National Football League. Did the Eagles put too much on Jalen Hurts' plate before this year started?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. In the RPOs, he's completely right on a lot of those plays. And it's not just the Eagles. I've got friends who cheer for different teams, and I swear 32 different fan bases think their team doesn't run enough. They want to run the ball. They want to see the I formation. They want 47 carries a game up the middle. And they don't understand. It is. It really is. Coaches want favorable circumstances. And it's amazing.
It's a math equation. I say it all the time. Yeah.
It's amazing this didn't get to the NFL until now. But coaches, have Jaylen go to the line of scrimmage and look, and if he sees an 8-man front, hey, we don't want to run into an 8-man front. So if you see that, there are certain circumstances, we want you to throw the football. That's the run pass option. Read the defense, see where they're aligned, and try to find the weakness, and let's attack the weakness. So it's like trying to always be right. And I do think there is a weakness to that now. If you think about the greatest teams that we've seen play football, they didn't always try to outsmart the opponent. Sometimes, we knew the Dallas Cowboys were going to hand the ball to Emmitt Smith, and it was going behind Larry Allen.
Yep.
And you stopped it. Every now and then, we still celebrated the fact that we stopped it 28 years ago in 1995. That's like a holy event in Philadelphia, the 4th and 1 stop. Well, guess what?
Actually felt the ground shake beneath me. Yeah. That's the 2 times at the vet in my life. Last out NLCS with Mitch Williams on the mound, and when Emmett got stopped twice at 4th. The only time I actually felt the vet shake below my feet.
I was at a sports bar watching it with a mixture of Eagles fans, Cowboys fans, and other people from other games who all focused on that. And you would have thought that the world just came to an end because everybody went nuts. People that just were there to hate Dallas loved it. Everybody became an Eagles fan for 5 minutes. But what we don't talk about is the other 150 times they run behind Larry Allen against the Eagles and they average 5 yards a carry, right? We don't talk about that. And so when you have great players, sometimes I think coaches in today's game worry too much about outsmarting the opponent and not what do we do well and how do I get the ball to my best players and give them a chance to make a play. And so there's a balance. There's a healthy balance you have to have between let's be in the right play and let's just give our guys a chance and let's do what we do. Because as you're pointing out, Jody, and there's a little bit of truth in this, in the fact, do you want your players thinking a lot, or sometimes you want your players just playing? And so if Jaylen's going up there and he's reading the defense, and then he's got to think about, somebody going in motion. Do I need to adjust this? This with the snaps on 2, there are play clocks at 6. Do I? And then once he gets the handoff, he's got to read the defensive end and decide: am I going to hand it to Swift? Am I going to keep it and run it myself? So there's a lot of thought going on, but that's central to a lot of the NFL, a lot of football in general these days. So I don't think it's too much for him. I think it's just, again, that's the way the game is shifted, and the Eagles are definitely at the forefront of the RPO world.
Yeah, Chip Kelly for all his for all the criticisms of Chip Kelly, and I always say he didn't have a filter. That was Chip's problem. But he brought so much to the NFL. It was ahead of the curve, so to speak. I say it all the time, Tommy. Innovation trickles up in football. Most industries, it trickles down, trickles up in football. Really, high school to college, and the high school coaches are the ones coming up with all this funky stuff. Then it goes to college. Then it finally hits the pros. But yeah, it's been here since Chip. Doug did it. And they do it now. And you have an option. And you would hear Carson Wentz. Watch old Carson. You would hear Carson all the time killing the play.
Right.
He's killing from run to pass or vice versa. It's not difficult to do. It's not like old school. You bring up the Dallas Cowboys, I'll go way back to Roger Staubach. Guys like that would run the game from the line of scrimmage. That doesn't happen. It's a math equation. All right. As you mentioned, you got an extra guy in the box. Let's throw it. You got they're in coverage. Let's run it. Blah, blah, blah. Eagles have the RPRs, run pass run option, they'd like to call it. He kills plays. Now, when you audible, and like in the Seattle game, and you take a shot and you make a mistake, then it's time to blame the quarterback. Now, I know people don't want to blame the quarterback, but another issue I have because it's become the narrative, is the blitz beater. I'll be the first to tell you the Eagles have no answers for the blitz. However, if you watch Nick Sirianni and Frank Reich's offense in Indianapolis with Phillip Rivers, they magically had blitz beaters. If you don't have a quarterback who is going to throw the ball quickly, you're not going to put that in your offense. It's not like Nick Sirianni doesn't know, hey, they're coming from here. Let's throw behind his ear. Let's throw it. They did it all the time in Indianapolis with Phillip Rivers. If Jalen Hurts isn't going to do that, why are we blaming the coaching staff?
Well, so let's think about the first Giants game. There was a sequence, and I feel like it was late in the first half. The Giants were blitzing, and Kenny Gainwell caught passes on 2 out of 3 plays, or maybe back-to-back plays. He caught passes in the left flat and gained 10, 12 yards on each play. And so at first, when the Giants were blitzing, the Eagles were throwing a football downfield, incompletions, wasn't working. Those 2 plays, all of a sudden, they have Gainwell in the flat. They get the ball to him, and guess what? There's a giant void because that's where the blitzer came from. Jaylen gets the ball out there. Gainwell gets out of bounds late in the half, and they went and scored some points. And you saw, okay, they do have the ability to throw the ball to checkdowns. But Sirianni and Hurts both are ultra aggressive and want chunk plays. And they're like the home run hitter who just keeps swinging harder to hit a home run. And it's like, forget the home run. Just swing and make contact and see what happens. And they keep trying to attack downfield because they want their big plays against the blitz. And it's just not working this year. The results are there. So they've got to adjust that. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in Tampa. I do agree that you're right. When Mariota came in the game, all of a sudden they had some plays that worked against the blitz, right?
Except the first one.
Yeah, right.
Steps in and throws an immediate interception. That wasn't working.
Well, that was that was a bad play. But after once he got in and settled down and was throwing passes kind of in a rhythm and got his feet under him,
Yep.
all of a sudden you saw quick throws to Covey. Quez Watkins actually looked like a legitimate NFL receiver. The ball was coming out quickly, and there was a kind of a rhythm to the offense. I agree. It's in the playbook. The stuff's in there. It's just that Sirianni and Hurts both want their big plays, and they keep forcing the issue. And that's where I wish I wish Jeff Lurie would sit down and say, quit going deep. Listen, it worked awesome last year. It helped get us to the Super Bowl, but it's not working right now. So don't force the issue. Get chunk plays by yards after the catch. Let's try a screen pass. Let's do something else. But throwing the ball downfield is just not working this year. And the fact that they won't adjust from that is incredibly frustrating.
Whenever I see the blitz, Tommy, coming, and you see it a lot from Wink Martindale, and I see Jaylen flush, I'm like, all right, play's over.
Yeah.
I mean, you either got to get rid of the football quickly, process it, or you got to step up and manipulate the pocket if you want that downfield throw. But the minute you flush, you might as well flush the play, because that's essentially where it's going.
Yeah, and I would tell him the thing that I think John Gruden's the coach I heard say this first. You never go broke taking a profit. And in other words, get 3 yards on a play. You don't have to get 30 yards every play. Just get 3. Move the chains. And so Jaylen, if you would just become comfortable on throwing a quick ball to a tight end, a running back, receiver is underneath, just get those 3 yards. 2nd and 7 is better than 2nd and 10. It's a heck of a lot better than 2nd and 15 or 2nd and 16.
True.
Just throw the quick passes when you need to, and that's okay. The big plays will come. Don't force them. And this year, the coaches are forcing them, and Jaylen's forcing them. And as we've seen, there's been countless interceptions down the field. The Quez Watkins a couple of weeks ago, there was an interception, a deep interception against Tampa in the first game there. There was a deep interception against Minnesota in that game. We've seen him all year. He's forcing them all into coverage. And last year, where AJ would make these amazing plays, have a touchdown, like he threw that deep ball in the Super Bowl into double coverage, shouldn't have thrown it, was a touchdown. This year, when he throws that, it's being picked off. So just because it worked last year doesn't mean that's a good plan.
But let me say this about one blitz beater they have, and John and I have had many discussions on this: the bubble screen. John hates it with a passion. I think it can be an effective play if you've got the right players to run it. You got the right scheme to do it. I think it'd be a tremendously effective play. It makes sense the Eagles would want to run it because, you want to get the ball out of the quarterback's hand as soon as possible. You can't pick up the blitz. You're in a package that doesn't provide enough protection. Just get it the hell out. But don't you have to judge the result more than anything else? There's the philosophy of it. There's the reasoning behind it. But then the play is run, and then you get to look at the film and go, we're just not capable of doing this. We're bad at this, be it the receivers don't block, or the linemen don't get out quickly enough, or Jaylen's not putting it right on the guy's hands when he should be able to because there's no defense because you're getting out that fast. At some point, don't you just have to go, all right, we can't do this. We've got to come up with a different call, a different play as a blitz beater, because every time we throw the bubble screen, it goes nowhere fast. Is that not the fault of the coaching staff, or is it the fault on Jaylen for continuing to throw the ball and just don't do it anymore? Jaylen, it doesn't work.
Well, that's a play where Jaylen doesn't have a choice a lot of times. That's a design play. We saw that at the end of the Cardinals game.
That's what I'm referring to. Yes.
Yeah, that was a called play. Get the ball to Gainwell, let him run, and the play it's a good play when it's executed well. The Eagles don't execute it well on a consistent basis. They've had a few. They had one where they ran it on 3rd and 15, and Devontae got a first down on it. He got like 18 or 20 yards.
Yeah,
but that was the one, huh?
Yeah, right, exactly. The majority of those plays are stopped right at the line or for a minimal gain, and the guys don't block it well. And I don't feel like it's a great play for either Devontae or AJ. AJ has tremendous run after the catch ability, but usually you're throwing the football and he's catching it on the move, and he can accelerate. when you throw the screen, you're starting and stopping, and he's not the quickest guy. He's a a big dude. That's a play that maybe you throw to Britton Covey, because that's the kind of thing that Covey could do.
Tommy, I thought that's where they would get the ball to DeAndre Swift in the passing game. I thought, the running back, because that's the guy, the running back should make that first guy miss. That's a lot of times when you have to do.
That's exactly right. So you're catching the ball with your feet already planted on the ground. You're not on the move. You've got to read the defender. You got to read the block, and you got to say, do I go in? Do I go out? Do I run full speed? Do I go 2/3 speed and try to read things? You got to have either a running back or a punt returner's kind of mentality. And neither Devontae or AJ is just very good at it. Yeah. And then neither one of them blocks consistently well in that play. They have plays where they look terrific with blocking, and they have other plays where they just are sloppy. Yeah. And throwing the ball to Gainwell, they tried it against Arizona, and Arizona, again, it wasn't blocked well, and it just wasn't executed well. And Arizona probably had an idea that was coming, so they attacked it well on defense. So, yeah, it's a play. If the Eagles want to keep that in their playbook, I'd say study it and figure out a way to execute it better. If not, get it out of the playbook. The only benefit to it is when the Eagles do the pump fake on it and have the blocker then go out onto the route. And we did see that's led to 1 touchdown this year and 3 or 4 touchdowns last year, where the defensive backs come up and then the guy who's pretending to block then runs downfield is wide open for a touchdown. So it's a nice way to get a big play. But the problem is you've got to run that play 50 times to set up that one fake that works. Yeah, and those 50 plays, if they're gaining it 100 yards, that's not good. You need more than 2 yards on that pass play.
Zach Pascal's not coming back through that door. He's not coming back to be able to do that.
He's not.
Is unfortunate.
Well, we kind of buried the lead. We've been talking the offense. I get it, Tommy, because offense is more exciting. That's where the stars are on this particular team. They're underachieving. But boy, this defense, man. I mean, it is people say it could get worse from Jonathan Gannon. Well, it got a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
It couldn't get worse from Sean Desai. Well, it got a hell of a lot worse. And they keep they're Benjamin buttoning things with communication. I described it. They're aging backwards. You're supposed to get better as the season goes on with communication. They're getting worse and worse and worse and worse. I've never seen anything like it. I really haven't.
It's discouraging.
Even bad defenses get incrementally better.
Right.
And they keep going backwards.
I don't have answers for you on the defense. I really don't. I just don't know what to say. I mean, not having Darius Slay has hurt him. There's no question. Not having Zach Cunningham for a couple of weeks hurt him. It feels like you guys before I came on were talking about how much blame does Howie deserve. And I think what I would tell you about Howie as he constructed this roster last year, where he took chances on fringe players, like when he traded for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they got him for a low pick. And the thought was that's a good trade for the Eagles because you're adding a talented player. He had a career year, not just a good year, he had a career year. This year they said, okay, well, let's try to bring in some safeties that we think could be a good stopgap player. Terrell Edmonds was terrible, just terrible. Justin Evans couldn't stay healthy. Kevin Byard has been mediocre since they traded for him. The moves just haven't worked. And I will tell you this is kind of awkward. The other day I was watching the end of the Titans game against Jacksonville. And I don't know if you guys saw it. Jacksonville at 4th down, they were on the verge of scoring territory. He didn't complete a pass. Trevor Lawrence drops back, tries to hit his tight end in the flat. Really good coverage. The ball is incomplete. Terrell Edmonds was in coverage.
And by the way, Derek Barnett in Houston.
I was going to say, exactly. Yeah. The other day I was looking at something and I went and looked at Houston Texans stats, and this is after he only been there for 2 games or 3 games. He had like 5 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
And I said, excuse me? Yeah. Did they design plays where the 10 blockers all went in another direction and he was allowed to just run after the ball by himself? Listen, it's not a good look. There's no question about it. The coaches this year have not been able to get these guys to play. And I do think part of it is that some of these players are thinking as individuals, and defense is all about functioning as a team, right? You have to do your job on defense, because if you don't do your job, protect your jab, cover your gap, protect your zone, then all of a sudden the defense fails. And there was a play against Arizona where Hassan Reddick is on the edge, and he sees Kyler Murray move to the opposite side of the field, just starts to. Well, then Hassan takes a step inside, and then Kyler switches and runs outside, right where Reddick would have been. But because Reddick's moved 2 steps inside, all of a sudden Murray's able to get down. He got a first down and down to about the 5-yard line, set up a touchdown. If Hassan Reddick just stays where he's supposed to, that Murray's not getting him around him, and they're going to stop him. Now, maybe he gains a couple yards, but he getting the first down. Yeah. Little things like that, where just quit trying to be an individual, quit trying to play hero ball. You watch linebackers that get into the wrong gap. You watch players just make boneheaded decisions, and part of that's got to be coaching. Part of it's on the players. Part of it's just not talented enough. It's really amazing that somehow, we talk about, what is it? The sum is greater than the whole of the parts, or whatever the old saying is. It feels like that's the opposite here. They bring out the worst in each other, and I don't know if it's the locker room, it's personalities, if it's coaching, the scheme. Did somebody put a curse on the defensive players? Right at this point, I'd be open to anything. Does anybody know an exorcist? The power of Christ compels you. Let's have him do that to Matt Patricia and see what happens. I don't know, man.
Along those lines, I want to ask you about 2 specific guys, and I think it plays into what both of you guys were just saying. The 2 big defensive dogs in the middle of the Eagles line, who both got off to very good starts this year. Shoot, we were making Jalen Carter the defensive player of the year after 6 games as a rookie. He's disappeared. Jordan Davis has gone backwards. I get it that the whole explanation is, well, they didn't play at Georgia. They were so deep on the defensive line. These guys didn't get their snaps and they're not used to it. They're babies. They shouldn't be running out of gas at this stage of the season. I'm sorry. I'm not buying that. Oh, they're overusing them. That's their job. They're supposed to be able to play at age 21 and 22, however old they are. They're not Fletcher Cox, who's logged a decade. They're not Brandon Graham, who's logged a decade plus. If they're running out of gas, I can kind of get it. I know what the shelf life of a football player is in the National Football League and when you start to see a drop-off because of age. These guys are supposed to be ascending, not flattening out and or going backwards. How much of an indictment is that on the coaching staff? Sorry, Mr. Rocker, I'm looking at you. But the first defensive coordinator, the second defensive coordinator, these guys have gotten precipitously worse over the course of the year. Who's to blame, Tommy Lawlor?
Jody McDonald. That's who I would blame, of course.
We're pointing it out? All right, I'll take that hit.
There's no question. I went back and reread my notes from the first Tampa game, and Jordan Davis was a key to the run defense. I think Tampa ran for 40 yards in that game. Jordan Davis clogged the middle, and then Jalen Carter was fantastic in that game. Really played at a high level. And I thought, man, I haven't written those words for either one of them in a long time. And you're right. It does feel like that those guys have worn down, and that's not a good look. Now, I will say that for defensive linemen, especially interior defensive linemen, that's a man's position. And those are still kids growing into men. And that you go look at Fletcher Cox, his first couple of years, he was still figuring things out. It takes a few years for a defensive tackle to really understand what it takes to be good week in and week out for a full season. And we're kind of seeing that. Maybe the coaches have not done some things well there. I don't know. And part of it may be conditioning, but whatever it is, you're absolutely right to point out those guys have not been the same players recently. In this defense, Howie Roseman constructed the roster so that the defensive line had to be the best unit on the defense. They had to really control games. That hasn't happened. All of a sudden, the back 7, which we knew wasn't great going into the season, we just didn't count on the front 4 or the front 5 being as mediocre as they are. And all of a sudden, that's made the back 7 look awful. And yeah, it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing there. But yeah, right now they're not helping each other, and it's been painful to watch.
Yeah, I still can't get to the point where, and I think the front, I would describe the front, Tommy, as disappointing,
Hmm.
um, because they have to dominate and they have to dominate consistently to make up for the back end. But I can't put those two groups on an even keel. I mean,
No,
when Gannon used to say rush and cover, cover and rush, well, the front, and I get why people are disappointed with them, but I looked at the PFF numbers because I haven't looked at them in a while. The front's still pretty damn good consistently. That back seven is a flipping disaster. I mean, it is a disaster. And they haven't dominated to the point Jody and I would bring up, in the preseason, Bucky Brooks from NFL Media would say the Eagles defensive front is the best position group in the entire NFL. In the entire NFL of any position group. And we both agreed with him at the time. On paper, it looks so good and so deep. Hasn't lived up to that billing, which I agree with. But it's still pretty good overall. That back seven is just.
John and I have argued this before, Tommy, and here's the point that I hang my hat on. They're supposed to be that dominant. If you're going to, now this is on Howie Roseman, if you're going to invest as much as the Eagles did, Brandon Graham makes big money. Fletcher Cox makes big money. Hassan Reddick makes big money. Josh Sweat makes big money. They put out 2 first-round draft picks. All right, it's the dollars are going to come, but that's big equity in that position. What have they put in the back seven? Slay makes money. Bradbury makes money. The other 5 guys, 6 guys, 7 guys make $1.85. So, yeah, the defensive line is supposed to dominate. And when they don't, which do you get more surprised by? The back seven, which you put together with the tape and glue, or the guys you're paying through the nose for up front. Yeah, it's supposed to be the defensive line dominate. I don't care what their PFF ratings are. They're not as good as they should be for the amount of money, as the kind of investment you made in them.
But here's the problem, Jody. You can neutralize that pass rush if you throw the football quickly. And again, you could line up Reggie White, Hugh Douglas, Clyde Simmons, Jerome Brown, whoever you want up front, line up, choose your favorite 4 guys. And if that ball is out in 2.1 seconds, those 4 guys are staring at each other and turning around and watching what's going on behind them because the ball's out so quickly.
Hopefully they're chasing because they need to chase.
So if that's the case, that's the case that Howie Roseman make a mistake by overpaying Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick. If they can be neutralized by just get it out of your hands in 2.1 seconds, well, then why the hell are you paying them all that money if they're not going to be able to do their job?
So here's the thing that I don't understand, and every coach says this, and we know that and listen, it's a fact. The rush and the coverage have to work in sync. They go together. If you have a bad pass rush, then and you have great coverage, well, that coverage can't last for 5 seconds. There's something's going to happen. If you have a great pass rush with terrible coverage, yet again, if they're flying off the ball, well, if the ball's out too quickly and it's easy to throw, that's not going to work. So they have to work together. And we've seen numerous times where it's 3rd and 5 and Eagles corners are 7-8 yards off the ball. And you see Kyler Murray or Tyrod Taylor dropping back and throwing a ball to a slot receiver, and he catches the ball right at the sticks and he's tackled. He only give up 6 yards on the play, but he only needed 5.
Right.
And you see Hassan Reddick just barely, he was bearing down on the quarterback, but the ball's out. And that has to frustrate the defensive line at a certain point. I don't understand why on these 3rd and short and mediums, they're not playing more press coverage and giving the defensive line a chance to get there. But then I will say there are any number of plays we've seen a 3rd and long. I think there was a 3rd and 14 the other day, and the quarterback had plenty of time and threw a deep ball down the field and got the first down. So when there are chances to make plays, the defensive line isn't making them. It's not a good defense, man. It is not a good defense.
It is not. That we can agree on.
I just don't know if this group is. I think they can play well enough to beat Tampa because Tampa just scored 22 points over the last 2 weeks combined.
Yeah.
So Tampa has their issues, but somebody's going to need some real crazy mojo to have this group do anything beyond that.
At Lawlor NFL, we love it when Tommy Lawlor stops by. Make sure you read him at Eagles Blitz, IGGLES Blitz.com. Does a tremendous job, tremendous knowledge going back years and years and years and years. So I'll end it there with you, Tommy.
Appreciate that.
This coaching staff is taking it from all sides. Where are you with the coaching staff and their impact on this? Obviously, they got a hand in it, but when we hear Nick Sirianni say we got to do a better job, we think about Andy Reid. That's obviously lip service.
Sure.
I'm a personnel guy. I say it all the time. Good times, bad times, it's the players. How culpable are the Eagles coaches for this collapse?
They have some hand in it for sure, right? I agree with you that a lot of it is on the players. I mean, Jaylen's turnovers have cost the Eagles games this year. If he just doesn't turn the ball over, they got a couple of additional wins probably.
Yeah.
AJ Brown had a key fumble against the Giants on Sunday, and then one in the loss to Dallas. We've just seen turnovers and mistakes, whether it's a drop pass, a missed block. You know, DeAndre Swift on that 1st and 10 run, he's got to know it's the end of the game. Just run the ball up the middle, and if you get 1 yard, it's 2nd and 9. Instead, he decides to bounce it left to try to go for a big play. There's a holding call at 1st and 20. You back up, you're at the border of field goal range. That changes the play calling completely. If it's 2nd and 9, they can throw the ball, they can run it. If you only get 1 more yard, it's 3rd and 8, but you're still solid to field goal range. You got a whole different set of options. The players are making some bad decisions. They're making mistakes. They're not making big plays. On defense, I really don't understand what happened there. So the defense had a month where they held like 4 straight teams under, I feel like 250 yards, but at least 300 yards and had good performances. They played well against the Dolphins. They did some good things, and then something happened, and I don't know if it's injuries or what have you. And that's where Nick Sirianni felt the need to make the move to Patricia, and things have not been the same since. Now, injuries have piled onto that, right? And so it's like he made a bad decision to move away from Desai, and then injuries and opponents have made that decision look even worse. And so that whole side of the football looks really flawed. So the big thing that I'll say is coaches need to have answers, and the coaches have not found a way. I think we would all agree. Forget the defense is bad. We all agree on that. But I think we'd all say that the defense is not playing to their talent, right? Even with the flawed construction, the issues they've got, they still should be better than what we're seeing. They should not be giving up 450 yards to the Arizona Cardinals, right? I think we would all agree on that.
Yeah.
So I think the coaches are culpable for the fact they haven't been able to get better play. The offense has had its issues, but it still finished top 10 in points and yards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the offensive coaching can be better, but the execution is part of that. Defensive execution is not good either. Howie's the talent that he got hasn't worked out, but the coaching has not been able to solve any of the problems, and that's been frustrating. So everybody's got a hand in this mess. Nobody's innocent. Nobody except for us three.
Speaking of execution, if they give up 450 yards to the Bucs this week, there'll be an execution.
Yeah, it's John McKay territory. I'm all for it. Yeah,
entire coaching staff, just line them up. Tommy, we love having you on. Whenever you jump in, we'll get you back up in a couple of weeks, hopefully to talk about an upcoming Eagle game. If not, the beginning of the offseason. We're definitely going to have you back on soon, brother. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, fellas. Fun to talk to you.
Thanks,
Tommy Lawlor, Eagles, IGGLES, EaglesBlitz.com. Very good Eagle website. All right, McDonald and McMullen coming back. We still got plenty to get in here in our second hour, including talking to one Chris Franklin. He's going to join us coming up about 15 minutes here on Birds 365.